I woke up this morning with the sun down, shining in.
The Coen brothers have some of the best comedic chops of any directors or writers around today, and the general consensus tends to be that, at least in terms of comedy, The Big Lebowski is their best. For many, including myself, it's one of the best comedies ever made. But what is it that makes The Big Lebowski so loved and so funny to so many people? I've seen people who've watched the movie and thought it was just an enjoyable comedy, or sometimes an okay comedy but also really weird. So, while I'm not banking on changing these people's minds, I would like to see if I can sum up some of the elements that I think give The Big Lebowski its unique edge. Now, I've never 100% agreed with the statement that comedy is easier than drama. I would say that certain types of comedy are not terribly difficult to write, particularly those that live in an absurdist, broad strokes parody or goofy humor world, but what is definitely not easy is character-based comedy. And this is one of the areas that the Coens have always shone. Unlike more absurdist styles, character-based comedy is always to some extent grounded in consistency and reality. Why certain characters talk the way they do, act the way they do, why they make the jokes they do, and how their reactions to situations affect the plot. Characters don't just act goofy because it's funny, there's a reason behind it. If a character in The Big Lebowski says another character's line, it changes the context of that line. They're not interchangeable.
Smokey, this is not Nam, this is bowling, there are rules.
Hey, Walter, come on, it's just, hey man, it's Smokey, so his toe slipped over a little, you know, it's just a game, man.
This is a league game.
Despite the fact that the film does not attempt a heavy psychological analysis of the characters, the Coens constantly infuse them with little details that make them very complex.
What do you say? When you get divorced, you turn in your library card, you get a new license, you stop being Jewish?
The dude is not just a hippie. He's a man with an obvious snark towards the establishment, who was more outwardly rebellious in his younger days, but has settled into a more relaxed state in his middle age, until trouble comes to his door. He's lazy by nature, but not without motivation.
You know, this is the fucking guy. I could find this fucking Lebowski guy.
Frugal but not beyond the lure of easy money, occasionally devious in order to stick it to the man.
Okay. The old man told me to take any rug in the house.
And ironically, considering his preference for peace and simplicity, is clearly frustrated throughout the entire movie, which makes it more funny seeing a guy like this completely out of his comfort zone. And as with most of the characters in The Big Lebowski, he seems to be stuck in his glory days, clinging to a time when his personal philosophy seemed more purposeful and meaningful. And he loves White Russians.
You have any Kahlua?
The dude is a character with a clear center, but is well-rounded, which allows for flexibility in his comedic style without ever feeling incongruous with who he is. All of the major characters are the same. Walter, The Big Lebowski, Maude, even Donnie is given some depth near the end of the film. Moments like these where a character who might seem to be already crystal clear suddenly shows greater depth, history and complexity are found in not just great comedies but great films in general. The depth extends to the relationships between characters, large sources of comedy being cultural clash between the wealthy establishment and bums like the dude, as well as between pacifism and militarism, counterculture and establishment, etc. But more than just a great character comedy, a massive part of what makes The Big Lebowski special is the delivery. The Coens are fantastic directors who know how to cast their films perfectly. Nobody but Jeff Bridges could be the dude, nobody but John Goodman could be Walter. They consistently choose actors who are as great at portraying real human emotions as they are at exaggerating and being goofy. But what makes The Big Lebowski stand out above the others is their script and the timing. One of the most common impressions people get from The Big Lebowski is that it sounds like improv. But the reality is that every single line in this script, every interrupted thought, shifting and reshifting train of conversation is right there in the script, and through talented actors and extremely meticulous direction, they manage to make it sound completely organic. And to me, it's extremely playful. Scenes don't get right to the point, they dance around it, toss it over your head, hide it behind their back and point to something else to make you think that's it, until they get to it in an unconventional manner and then get back to dancing.
Yeah, Walter, what's your point?
Huh?
Walter, what is the point? Look, we all know who is at fault here. What the fuck are you talking about?
Huh? No, what the fuck are you? I'm not. We're talking about unchecked aggression here,
What the fuck is he talking about?
My rug.
Forget it, Donnie, you're out of your element.
Not only does this create the feeling of an unusually naturalistic conversation for film, but it's also constantly surprising, inflected with personality, and keeps the viewer trying to keep track of it. Speaking of naturalistic speech, this leads me to repetition. Now this is a little harder for me to explain, but the Coens have a hallmark in their scripts involving characters repeating lines. I guess why this works for comedy may simply be how repetition drives a point and forms strong memories. People remember catchphrases, slogans, memes, etc. because they call back laughs from before.
His wife goes out and owes money all over town and they pee on my rug?
They pee on your fucking rug?
Peed on my fucking rug.
That's right, dude. They peed on your fucking rug.
I guess there could be an element of absurdity of it all as well, and perhaps the idea that people get stuck on certain thoughts and ideas, and repetition of lines show how their feelings towards a single thought can change over time.
Have you ever heard of Vietnam?
Oh,
You're entering a world of pain, son. We know that this is your homework. We know that you stole a car.
And the fucking money.
And the fucking money. And we know that this is your
We're
homework.
gonna cut your dick off, Larry.
The Big Lebowski includes a particularly notable example of this that is not found in other Coen films, where the dude seems to act like a sponge, absorbing the parlance of other characters. What does this mean? Why does this make me laugh? Well, I have to say, I don't quite know. Lastly, there's the more meta element. The Coens are experts at playing with genres and conventions, and The Big Lebowski is perhaps the most fun and fancy-free with this of all their films. At a glance, The Big Lebowski might look like a stoner comedy, but beyond the central character's archetype and recreational use of marijuana, it has little in common with the genre. It has homages to countless genres, but most dominantly it draws from westerns and especially noir. It does this lovingly at times, but also takes the genre expectations and flips them on their head. There's a complicated mystery with many twists and turns, but rather than reveal a larger conspiracy, most of the parties end up being clueless competitors who all know as little as a detective. And rather than the detective being some suave private eye, he's a laid-back stoner hippie. One of the minor details that I find hilarious is how during the scenes at the alley, the movie often threatens to turn into a dodgeball-esque sports comedy. We're constantly reminded of the league, of the semis coming up, and we're introduced to a cartoonish villain who constantly tries to provoke the protagonist into competitiveness. Yet, ultimately, they mostly ignore him, the game is never shown, hell, the dude never even bowls.
He's cracking.
The film pokes light at all kinds of genres and all kinds of trends and cultural groups, but it never feels malicious, simply quirky, humorous texture to this wonderful quirky stew of a movie. When all is said and done, a lot of crazy shit happens throughout The Big Lebowski, and it ends rather obscurely. What was it all for? Well, it's hard to say, but it's a film that leaves you with something to mull over and a lot of stuff to look back on on rewatches. The Big Lebowski is a movie that calls back on itself, builds strong and quirky and idiosyncratic characters, is full of surprises, twists, subversion, homages, spectacular comedic performances, and some of the most well-crafted conversations I've seen in a film. And for me, that's why it is a strong contender for the greatest comedy ever made.